So when it comes to the GOAT debate, the biggest debate really in sports, there's one for every sport. And I think that this can really be such a fierce, kind of fiery topic, especially when people are really attached to the player that they see as the GOAT, and it's like you're not going to change their mind, so they're just going to ring out a load of stats and everything to prove why their favourite is the GOAT, even though it's a subjective thing and it's your own opinion. So I think that really, being in the amount of GOAT debates that I've been in, I've kind of seen a lot, and I mean a lot of hypocrisy in these debates. And there's a load of things that, if I'm honest, all sides do, because there's some people, it's not just Messi and Ronaldo that people think is the GOAT, there's other players involved, believe it or not. But most of the hypocrisies, I will admit, happen between Messi and Ronaldo fans. It's not really that much between all the others. However, yeah, there are quite a few hypocrisies that I've seen, and some of them come about a lot more than others. And I'm going to kind of point a few of these out in this video today. So, getting straight into it, most GOAT debates really involve just a few players, and these players are Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi, the two obvious ones, the two that have really been in it for the past, probably 10-15 years, if I'm honest. And then you've got another couple of players, Pele and Maradona. So those are really the four main players in the GOAT debate, with the main ones being Messi and Ronaldo. And I'm not going to sit back and pretend that isn't mainly because of recency bias, because some people want to dismiss the fact that Pele and Maradona should be in the GOAT debate, and I'm just like, no, they're in it, and very deservedly. So the main thing that I come across in the GOAT debate is really with people's hypocrisies and double standards, because it's like they will take certain players and they will hold some players to higher standards than others, which I find to be ridiculous. If you really want to make a good point, you need to hold players to the same standards. But a lot of these hypocrisies and double standards really come around, first of all, who should be in the debate, because I really find it funny when a Messi or Ronaldo fan tries to kick the other one out because of a ridiculous reason, or they try and kick out Pele or Maradona because they won't be able to play in this era. That is ridiculous. If Pele and Maradona were in this era, that would be a completely new debate. Pele and Maradona would tear this era apart, and it wouldn't even be a question. So obviously you should be in the debate, and also, like I just touched on, the reasons for kicking people out of the debate, because I've never really seen a good reason to kind of kick a player out of the GOAT debate. It's always these really petty, really terrible reasons, they wouldn't play well in this era, they played in a really easy era, they played against plumbers and things like that. It's you're literally not really making an argument, you're just being incredibly petty, and it seems like you're just coming up with this off the top of your head, to be honest. So really, people's GOAT is usually their favourite out of a certain group of players. That's usually what I've found. It's not like they've looked this up and they've decided off what they've seen who they think the GOAT is. It's usually they pick a favourite player and then they they make an argument as best they can to actually say why this person's the GOAT, which that is really not a good way to go about it, but that's what 90% of fans do, and then the other 10% don't usually have one because usually when you look into something like this, you see it just doesn't make any sense to have a GOAT in the first place. And then usually one of the main things people do is they cherry pick stats to show who is meant to be the better player, therefore the GOAT. And this really, really annoys me, because you'll just see, for example, with Messi fans, they'll just pick, he's got a World Cup, that means he's better than Ronaldo. And then with Ronaldo fans, they'll bring up the fact that he's got 5 Champions Leagues, which you can argue which one of them means more, or which one of them is the more impressive accomplishment, but it's you're just cherry picking certain stats. Those stats aren't the worst, if I'm honest. Those were a couple of pretty bad examples, to be honest. It's more It's more like when they go really in depth with stats like, oh, Messi has more dribbles than Ronaldo or something, or especially the ones where they say, oh, Ronaldo has more headers. It's like you're really making this too specific, and you're really making it obvious that you're desperate to get a point over someone. And then a lot of the things they do is, another thing they do is they disregard stats that don't favour their player that they see as the GOAT. So it's like they will play down certain stats and say, oh, that isn't as important because for whatever reason. I've seen so many reasons. Like, they will blame the fact that they're on a really good team. They'll say they've had better teammates. It's just, all of these things are just, but to me, they're ridiculous, because it's like you're really looking desperate to try and make a point. And they also seem to dismiss the fact that there are many aspects to consider, such as the teams that the players played for, which really is the main one, because if you look at Messi and Ronaldo as the perfect thing to bring up in this, the teams Messi and Ronaldo have played for are very, very different, and very, very different in ability. So comparing them is very difficult because of that, but people just dismiss that. They try and act like that isn't a factor. And then also another big one, when you're comparing players such as Pele and Ronaldo and Messi and Maradona, it's the era that they played in, which does play a factor, because this also goes into the next point, the conditions that the players played in, also the rules the players played under, because believe it or not, in the past 40-50 years, the conditions for football pitches have changed, and the rules have, especially the pitches, because they used to play on pitches that looked like they were flipping Sunday League ones, and then now they're just completely flat, and you can run across a football pitch without risking breaking your ankle or something. Whereas in the olden days, it was like, you could get injured through running down the pitch. I mean, the conditions and the rules, and also the rules have changed as well. Also, another thing is technology's come into it. So it's like all of these factors seem to be dismissed in this debate, because the funny thing is, when these factors are brought in, that's when people start to realise the GOAT debate doesn't make much sense. And if they do come across all of these factors and they still think there's a GOAT, they're usually dismissing them and saying they don't mean as much as you're putting them across to mean. And I'm just like, okay, but you sound like an idiot saying that Pele and Maradona would not be able to play in this era. Because look at the pitches, just look at someone like George Best as well, the pitches he played on. He did the skills that players do now on pitches that were incredibly uneven. So you're telling me he wouldn't be able to do those skills on flat pitches? Yeah, see, that's the exact point I tried to make, but people just dismiss it. Also, another thing that I find, and this annoys me as well, is dragging players down to elevate other players. So to do this, what people will do is they won't really bring up their players' accomplishments, they will drag down the importance of other players' accomplishments. So when they bring up their favourite player, what they've done looks more impressive because they've dragged someone else down, which I think is just ridiculous, if I'm honest. So they'll say that their player accomplishments are more impressive after they've dragged another player's accomplishments down. So a big way they'll do this is they'll make favourable comparisons. So they'll, for example, what a lot of Messi fans will do is they'll bring up all the individual awards he's won and say, oh, he's won all these individual awards, he must be a better player. And then another thing that Ronaldo fans will do is they'll bring up the fact that he scored the most goals ever for a player. But then it's like they don't want to bring the context into that, and that really is for someone who is in a GOAT debate, that's their worst nightmare. When you bring context into it, it completely cripples their argument, because there's a reason they're leaving out the context. Because when you come to drag down a player, the context really destroys their argument, because it's just like they literally just can't handle that, and then they dismiss the context as well. So that's probably why dragging down other players to elevate the favourite player really does irritate me, because they're leaving out context that most people can see. And then really one of the main ones that I want to bring up in this is the actual criteria that people have, and this in my opinion is the worst one, because once again we're coming back to cherry picking. They will cherry pick their favourites' accomplishments and elevate them as much as they can, and they really desperately try to elevate them as far as they can. With this, they will also try and dismiss accomplishments of the other players. So when Messi wins, I think it's the MLS Cup he won, the Messi fans will rave about that. But then when Ronaldo wins, I can't remember what it was called, I think it was like the Arab Champions Cup or whatever it was, Messi fans will say that it means nothing, it's a terrible league, who's even playing against, which is quite rich considering Messi's in the MLS and there's like no one really that good in the MLS. And I know players in the Saudi Pro League aren't as good as they used to be, but they're better than the players in the MLS. I think we can all admit that. But then again, vice versa will be done as well. So if Messi wins something, Ronaldo fans will try and tear it down and they'll elevate what Ronaldo's done. So it's like, I see this as really hypocritical, and people always say to me, oh, that's what you do. And I'm like, I don't tear people down. I just give my opinion, because there's a difference between tearing down what someone's done and thinking what one player has done is more impressive than another. I can think that Ronaldo's 5 Champions Leagues and that 3-peat Champions League is more impressive than Messi winning a World Cup that was filled with controversy. That isn't me tearing Messi down. I haven't specifically brought Messi up, I brought the accomplishment up, not the player. That's what people seem to forget. So then they will also select certain criteria based on what benefits their player. Also, obviously, with leaving out the context, but they'll pick all of this criteria so that it makes their player look better, and they will leave out other criteria that could potentially damage their argument. And this is done all the time, and this is probably what annoys me the most, because it's like, I ask people what their criteria is, and then they list the criteria that benefits their player, and the annoying thing is they deny it. They say, oh, I don't select the criteria based off what my player has done. And it's clear that they do, because everyone's criteria is so different. And I get that it's a debate, it's an opinion, people are going to have different criteria, but I think it's really hypocritical, and it's a massive double standard that people will select their criteria for who they think the GOAT is based off what their favourite player has done, because they're clearly going down their accomplishments and going down their awards and selecting. They've got to have the most, I don't know, Player of the Year awards, they've got to have the most Ballon d'Ors, they've got to have the most goals and assists per game, they've got to have the most goals and assists, they've got to have the most league titles, and then they'll leave out the Champions League, because why? And then they've got to have at least a World Cup. That's the main one that Messi fans will use to disregard Ronaldo. He doesn't have a World Cup. So do you see what I mean? They're leaving out the context there. So those are a few of the hypocrisies that I've found with the GOAT debate. There's probably a few more that I could come up with, but those are the main ones, and that last one was like the big main one. So let me know what you think. What is your opinion on the GOAT debate? Do you think that there is a definitive GOAT? Do you think that there's more than one? Do you think it's more like a group of players that are the greatest players of all time, and that there's not like one specific one? So let me know your opinion on the GOAT down in the comments. If you agree with me that there's a lot of hypocrisy in the GOAT debate, even if you think there's a GOAT and you think there's a lot of hypocrisy in the GOAT debate, leave the video a like so I know that at least a couple of people agree with, well, at least some of what I've said. Yeah, so thank you for listening to the video, and I will see you hopefully in the next one.